Okay, I think we're live.
Yay.
Yay! Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
We have got some people in the chat already.
Mhm.
Well, welcome, everybody. It's Tuesday night live stream. I'm Mara. This is my channel. But I am joined by two wonderful guests this week, and I'm so excited. So, ladies, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. I have a podcast called Chapter 3 Podcast, and I read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, romance, and a little bit of everything else.
Okay, my name is Ashley. I am known as Bookish on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I am a youth services librarian, and I read a little bit of everything. Yep.
Yeah. So I think this is a commonality between us, is that we all read a little bit of everything. I'd say we're all safely described as pretty omnivoracious, and we all read just a lot of books. I don't know if we want to say specific numbers, but I read more than 300 books last year, and I think you guys were probably
Same.
Yep.
same. Okay.
I think I read more last year than I ever have before.
Me too.
But yeah.
I think mine was second highest. Most pages I've ever read.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we read a lot of books, and we often get the question, how do you read so many books?
All the time.
Yeah, that's something I get this in my comments a lot. I bet you guys do too.
Yeah.
And I think we've all made videos talking about, like, hey, here's how you can read fast, like kind of more of a tip-based type discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought what would be interesting would be for us to just get into some of the logistics of, like, how we read so much. Because it has come to my attention that there are booktubers who read a lot, and it is speculated that they don't actually read as much as what they say they read. You know, our lovely friends over on Guru Gossiper and some other places. There's a few names that come up. It's sort of widely known or speculated that these people probably don't read everything they say they do. But I know we all actually read everything we read. So I think there can sometimes be a level of, like, that's impossible. I get that comment sometimes of, like, that is not possible. I know you work. How do you, like, how is this possible? So I think that this is an interesting topic that could take us a lot of different places, but I thought maybe we could start with, yeah, like, if somebody asks you, how do you read so much? What's sort of your instinctual response to that?
Go ahead, Bethany. You go first.
I mean, I get this in my comments all the time. And I mean, there's a longer and a shorter answer. I think my short answer usually is, well, I read kind of fast and I don't watch much TV and I read in multiple formats. Like, that's kind of my brief answer. Like,
Same.
Like, I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but I think that's a lot of it, is just I always am reading multiple books in multiple formats. I watch very little television and I read faster than average. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's about the same as me too. I read in multiple formats, so there's always an audiobook, a physical book, an ebook. I don't really watch TV like that. Like, it's just not my thing. I've been that way for a while now. And then for me personally, I think the entirety of my job is not reading. I don't get to sit at work for 8 hours and read a book, but there are moments in which I can justify saying, like, as part of, like, my work plan, or I'm working on reader's advisory. So that kind of helps me out a little bit too.
That, I mean, truly the dream is, hey, as part of my job,
I can sit down and read a book.
Me and Miss Bev are gonna go hang out over here and
Yeah.
Which I mean, like,
shout out
for
to
me,
Bree.
like this basically is part of my job. So like I do read as because I don't have, and that's the thing too. Like I have children. I don't have a full-time job. I do YouTube and podcast. I mean, I do a lot of stuff. I do like YouTube and podcasting, and sometimes like lately not as much, but like sometimes I do some like side work and stuff too. But I don't know. I mean, I make time for reading though. I think that's the thing is it's like I read every day for like a low reading day for me might be like 30 or 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like a very low reading day for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think my answer is pretty similar. I mean, I guess I'm different that no part of my job technically is a part of reading. I do have parts of my job where I can listen to audiobooks. So whenever I have the chance to do that, I take it. So sometimes I can multitask that way. But I think one thing I was like reflecting on, because I tend to give a pretty similar standard answer, right? Like I have a very high reading speed from getting through grad school. I actually saw something on TikTok the other day.
Did we all did grad school, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe that's yeah, because if you get any kind of liberal arts degree where you're just having
you
to
have
read.
to read so much. You have to learn how to read quick and absorb the material.
Yeah. And I did that 2 times around. So for me, it's been a professional reading type of situation.
Yeah. Well, I saw on TikTok the other day, there was like and I don't know how real this was, but it was like testing your reading speed. And it was saying like, oh, it got up to, I forget however many words. And it was like, almost no one can read this quickly. And I was like, this isn't, I mean, it's fast, but like, this is doable. So I genuinely think that's a big part of things. But something else I was thinking about was that I think a lot of people, when they approach reading, they think of it as really deep reading. So, and I guess like the analogy I was thinking of is the way I think some people watch like a few episodes of Law and Order in an evening, I will read a lighter book that way. So like, it's not super deep, like absorbing reading for me. It's like, I'm just sort of like casually, bebopping along through this. I may not be like super into every single word on the page. I'm more just like consuming the book for a story versus really, like that kind of reading kind of on the level of like, hey, a light like Law and Order rerun versus I think a lot of people, the way they think about reading is it's almost like going to a play or going to the opera. Like it's this really immersive, really like focused experience that you don't, do every single day. So like you really want to be focused on it. And that's just not how all of my reading is.
Some of it, but not all of it. Well, I mean, like I think an example is like I'll have some books I'm reading and when I'm reading that way, like slowly, I'll read them a little bit at a time through the month. So like, this month I've been working my way through Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, and I'm reading like an essay at a time. I'm not reading like quickly because I want to absorb it and it's slower. So like something like that, yeah, sure, it's going to take me longer to get through because I'm stopping and I'm tabbing things and I'm thinking about it. But I don't do that with most of the books I read. I mean, I think about them enough that I can give like good reviews and I'm enjoying it, but like it's not that deep usually,
No, I think one thing I have been working on is my subvocalization, which helps with reading speed and more so kind of reading in, because I don't think people realize that you don't, because we're taught to read every word in our head when you learn how to read. So, and people don't realize that actually slows you down. And when you're able to stop doing that as much and kind of read in chunks, it speeds up your reading. You're not necessarily, like you said, Mara, you're not reading every single word, like word for word for word. And it helps. It really does help. And you're right. There are certain, even when I start thinking about, there are certain genres that I know take me a little bit longer to read because it's, for me, just mentally, I have to put myself a little bit more into the story, whereas something else, I'm like, it doesn't take as much effort. And I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain that, but I don't know if y'all have had that feeling before where you can pick up a book and you're like,
Yeah.
this is not going to take as much mental effort for me to read this as opposed to, like, for me, difficult for me is usually like science fiction. That takes me a little bit more headspace.
I agree.
But like, for me picking up like some YA, some middle grade, like it's not that the story isn't as good or it's the worth is not there or it's not on the same level. It's just that I know that I can process that a lot quicker than I may be able to process another genre.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think it's similar to is having kids, which might sound like a weird comparison, but when you first when you first have a child, right? It takes so much effort and mental energy to like pay attention to them and take care of them and figure out what they need. Like it's so hard. But like the more you do it and the more you get to know them, the more like some of it just develops as like natural routines in the back of your mind and you don't have to pay like that close attention if it's your own child. If it's someone else's child, it's a whole different thing. But it's like but like if it's your child, like oh, they're crying because they're fussing versus like, oh, they got hurt, I should go see what happened. Like that kind of thing.
You know the difference, yeah.
You know the difference. Yeah. But like I think with reading it's similar that if you read a lot, especially in genre fiction, like you get familiar with the flow of the story, you get familiar with the tropes and the way that things go, and like your brain doesn't have to work as hard to figure out what's going on and like follow the patterns,
Yeah, like I think that reminds me of what they talk about with driving, that actually if you're having to actively think about driving, you're at greater risk of having an accident. It's something that needs to move from kind of like the active part of your brain to a more subconscious task. And I think that can be true with certain kinds of reading. And I also think certain authors, like I just jive with the way they write. So like Ruby Dixon / Jessica Clare, how she writes stories, like I can take that in really, really easily, where even a different kind of romance author, maybe I don't jive with their writing as much. So that may take a little extra work, even just between authors and my own personal idiosyncratic, vibing with someone.
Yeah.
Bree brings up that she hit 269, so another power reader here. But I know readers who've read over 700 books.
I do too. I don't know them, but I've seen it.
I know a couple.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, it's wild.
And I think that brings up a good point that, Ashley, you were talking about in your video on Friday of like, what is a lot is relative, right? Like, I mean, people think of us as big readers, but like, we're not reading 700 books a year.
I just can't. That's not a thing that's going to happen in this part of the world for me.
Well, like, and it's interesting. So this year, normally the last couple of years, I had hit right around 300. This year I got to 370, but I think it's also because I was reading way more romance than I had before. And I just read it quicker and faster. And I was looking at my numbers and I think almost 30% of my reading was romance. So like, of course my numbers were going to be higher than usual.
Yeah. Well, and Anne-Marie says, I'm both surprised and yet not that there may be booktubers who read less than they say they do. I think it's disappointing if someone feels they need to lie about their reading quantity. Do you guys think, again, Ashley, getting into some of the things you were talking about in your video, what kind of pressures do you think creators or people who are kind of public readers feel to hit a certain number, to talk about how many books they read? Like, how do you think that influences kind of the ecosystem of people setting a reading goal of books each year?
Well, because I think, we're a reading community, and I think it's often assumed if you don't read, you don't have content to push out. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of does work that way in some ways, but I think there's workarounds to that as well. For me, it always feels like it's like keeping up with the Joneses because it hasn't always been like this. It's just something I've seen in the past few years where I think it's wanting to keep people watching is what's causing it. And I think when people see someone else's video hit a certain level of success based off of um, a certain number, whatever it may be, I think that even if it's not intentional on the creator's end, or even if it's subconsciously done on the viewer's end, you want to keep up, or you feel like you need to keep up with that, or everybody just has this essence. And what I saw in the comments for a lot of people were saying, like, it varies. Some people said when they first joined BookTube, they felt that pressure. They felt like, oh my gosh, if I'm not reading 30 books a month, I feel bad. And then some people said it just took them time to realize, like, this is not what I can keep up with. I can't do this. This is not what my channel can be focused on. I just can't. And I have to remind myself that I can't do that. But I think it's the keeping up with the Joneses type of culture. We want to make sure that we still have content that's relevant to viewers. As much as people like to say they're not concerned about numbers, I'm not concerned about subscribers. I'm not concerned about how many views I have on a video. Realistically, we're human beings. There's a lot of effort that we put on the back end when it comes to this stuff. People, who may not be on BookTube may not realize there's a lot of hours that go into editing, coming up with content, reading these books. So you want your work to pay off. So at the end of the day, I think that small part of us is concerned about what we're putting out doing well. And if we see that someone else saying, oh, I read 45 books this month, and we know that that's going to be a video that does well, you may be subconsciously inclined to do the same. And at the same time, though, like I said in that video, there are people who genuinely just read that much. And unfortunately, it bothers me a little bit, which I don't think I really said in the video, because I kind of didn't take either or type of stance. It bothers me personally because I know that I read a lot. And when I see others take advantage of that situation and they're really not, they're not reading that much, it makes me feel like what we're doing as our passion, our hobby, it feels like it invalidates it a little bit, because then people start to question whether this is something that we're really doing or not, or whether we're making this up. And it just, I don't know. For me, it feels like a vicious cycle. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard, right? Because I see plenty of booktubers who've been pretty successful who probably read on average like 10 books a month, which is like great, right? The average person reads like a couple books a year. So, if you're reading like, I mean, I think it's probably going to be harder to create content if you're not reading at least like 8-ish a month, but you can still make it work even if you're not. But like, there's definitely no need to read the amount that we do to make content. Like, if anything, we end up having to like jam it all into our wrap ups because it's like so many books to talk about, I mean, so it's not like it's convenience, it's like, it's just like, I don't know. I think what's hard about it is, I like, on the one hand, I really don't think people should feel pressure to read a ton. But on the other hand, I also, don't love when it is like pushing back on like, well, you just shouldn't be reading as much as you do for people who do naturally read that stuff, because like there should be a place to celebrate it. Because like I, I don't know, like growing up, I've always been a big reader, and like people when I was in middle school and high school thought that was weird that I was like always reading so many books. And like there should be a place for people who are big readers, whether they read a few books or they read a ton of books, like to be able to celebrate that and be authentic about it and not feel like that's a weird thing either. So I don't know. I think it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys get this, but sometimes I get comments to the effect of like, well, like, what do you do for a living? Because like, I want a job that lets me read that much, or like basically implying like, don't you have a life? And
actually had someone, I asked on Twitter the other day and I'm sure it was just a joke, and I know that it was just a joke because of the individual that it came from. Like, what are some bookish assumptions that you have? And someone said that you don't have a job and you read all day. And I always try to, even when I talk about like my library videos or librarian videos, I always emphasize, please do not think that even what I read and how much I read is what all librarians are doing, because we don't get to sit around all day and read books. And I feel like, and it sucks because I read so much, and then I feel like people are going to align that with my job, which is the misconception of my job, and why people are like, oh, I would love to be a librarian and sit around and read all day. And it's like, yeah, honey, it really doesn't work that way. Like that's, we're more like social workers to some degree, depending upon where you are. And that's another thing I think that bothers me about, and it's sad to say it bothers me that I read that much, that I feel like I'm giving not a bad name, but I'm giving a misconception to a job that I really, really love. And people think that that's what we do, and it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, like people sometimes underestimate, like, even though I don't have a normal job, like I do have a family, and with the stuff that I do, I think people underestimate the amount of time it takes to do things like film and edit videos and like record and edit podcast episodes. Like that is very time consuming. And I work the equivalent of full time on that stuff plus plus like extra jobs I'll pick up on the side and stuff. So I'm working the equivalent of like at least 40 hours a week doing all plus like being a mom and being a wife, and I fit reading in where it fits, but it's not like I read all the time all day long. So I don't know, it's interesting. Like I think people underestimate, like if you make it a priority, how much you can do if you like. Yeah. And like sometimes I fit it around like some tasks that I do, like if I'm making thumbnails or if I'm doing like pre-editing where I'm just editing out like chunks of, I don't know if you guys do that, like chunks of space. Like I'll listen to an audiobook while I'm doing stuff like that. So like I'm listening to an audiobook and reading while I'm doing, that kind of work. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think it's interesting. Like I work probably 50 to 60 hours a week in my job, depending on how busy I am. But like, it's interesting even just looking in the last year, because we've all been in lockdown. So it's like, I don't have a commute. I am not going out. And then I've also had an autoimmune disease this year. So like, I'm also just like not well. So like, I don't even really want to go out even if I could. And yeah, like between that and you don't watch TV, like I watch a little, but not really. And then unlike you guys, I think I don't know what your work schedules are, but I may work more hours at work, but I don't have the competing, taking care of a kid or spending time with my partner or whatever. Like I don't have to worry about that. So that also gives me some time. So like, yes, it's my main hobby. So like I do it a lot. And more so even in the last year. So yeah, like I think people underestimate how much time there is to read if it's a priority.
Yeah. Well, and like even some of my like household related things, like honestly, part of it, I think almost 40% of my reading in 2020 was audiobooks. So
yeah.
Oh my God. Literally my house just shook. I don't know if the SWAT team is coming for me, but okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah, like this year I had more audiobooks than I have in the past. And I like reading physical books, but this year has been so busy being in quarantine and having kids and stuff that like audiobooks have been very helpful for me and helpful for my mental health, I think too, of like having something to like distract me. But I listen to audiobooks while I'm like cooking or cleaning the house or hanging out at the playground and making sure my kids are safe, or I guess that's the thing, is like I'm able to fit ebooks and audiobooks around a lot of the household things I'm doing, or when I'm going to get groceries. Like all of those are places that I'm multitasking. So, and not everybody can do that. Yeah. Like some people can't do that, can't like focus on both things at once, and that's fine, and valid,
But yeah, that's how I do it too. I have an hour commute in the morning. By the time I drop the baby off at school, by the time I make it to work, that's an hour on an audiobook, depending upon what speed I'm listening to. You know, I can get an audiobook knocked out in a day or two. It's nothing to do it. When we get up in the morning and we're getting dressed, like, she's still at an age where, like, I'm not going to allow her to sit in front of the TV all day long either. I think people kind of don't realize that. Like, so if we're in the house, there's not really many places for us to go right now. We're in quarantine. I'm not going to take her really anywhere. You know, it's kind of cold. She's still a little on the younger end. So if we're here, she's usually here playing with her toys. I have an audiobook playing while we're just hanging out on a Saturday morning. So it's, for me, it's how you, like you said, how you prioritize your time. If I'm doing dishes, the same way someone would listen to music while they're doing dishes or they're cleaning their house, I just swap it out for an audiobook. It's just an exchange of services. In my mind, I just choose not to do certain things, and I put an audiobook or a book in place of what someone else may be doing with their time. Like, I don't know. I just any nook and cranny I can get into some reading, and I do. And like Bethany said, I don't have to be reading all day every day. Like, I have other responsibilities. I can't sit down and read all day every day. But just kind of going back to what I was saying too, like, I don't like to assume when people read a lot, you don't know just what may be going on in the background either. Because for me, you know, going through therapy and stuff, I was taught to use reading as a coping mechanism to kind of help me, like, take myself out the moment when things get too intense. And like, typically sometimes too, like, I would leave, but pandemic, I'm not going anywhere. So that's kind of like my place to go. That is, books are my safe space. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. You don't know why someone may be reading a lot. They could be stressed out and they could say, you know what, I'm super stressed. Reading helps calm me down. Or, you know, I'm going through a bout of depression. It's going to help me work my way out of depression. So it's just a lot of factors, I think, that we kind of leave out. When we start talking about, oh, this person reads a lot, they can't be really reading this much.
Yeah. I'm going to pause and take a couple of questions that I thought might be interesting. One is somebody asking just what all the degrees we have are. So let's rep for our liberal arts trifecta here.
Okay. I have a bachelor's degree in history, a master's in teaching, and a master's in library information science.
I have a bachelor's in international studies and a master's in public diplomacy, which was a mix of communications and international relations.
And I have a bachelor's in accounting, minor in French, and a master's in religion with a focus in literature. So,
wow,
yeah, we're well rounded here. I feel like and then Darcy was asking, Ashley, did you say subvocalization?
Yes, I did.
What does that mean?
So I always get confused on how to explain it. Like, there is a voice that you hear when you read, whether that's your voice or not. There is an internal voice that you hear, and it's called subvocalization. And when you're able to turn that voice off or lower that voice, you're able to read more. And they say that it really comes from how you're taught how to read, that you're supposed to sound each word out. So you end up picking up this behavior where you're saying every single word that you see on page in your head, whereas your brain actually does not need to do that. Your brain can look at a page and process the words on the page and chunk it without having to see every single word and still know the meaning behind the words on the page. It takes practice. I'm still horrible at it because I like hearing that voice. It's my comfort zone. But they say doing stuff like chewing gum, listening to music, counting while you're reading, will actually stop you from hearing that little voice inside of your head.
Interesting. I can do it where it like skips words, where I'm reading all the words, but like the subvocalization skips words, if that makes sense.
That's what I can do. Yeah, that's what I do.
And I can also, it's faster in my head. This is something that I want to comment on, actually, because this is another thing I see people talking about with sped up audiobooks, because I see this on Twitter, a lot of people being like, I don't believe that you can actually understand what they're saying when you speed it out. Okay, which is so
Yeah.
funny to me.
I
So
can't focus on it if it's at normal speed. Like
I
I
can't
will.
wonder.
I
Okay,
can't.
but one thing that I have wondered, I think it is something you can train, because when I was a kid, I went through a phase where like I really want Smash Mouth was really big, right? And I really wanted to be able to like say and sing all the lyrics of their really fast songs, or like of rap songs where they go really quick. And so I trained myself to be able to listen and hear and understand the lyrics and say them that fast. And like you can train yourself and train your brain to be quicker. And because of that, I think that's part of why I can listen to audiobooks sped up and I can understand like what they're saying and I don't have a problem with it.
So Bethany loves reading because of her love of Smash Mouth. That's what I got from
That's
that.
what I got out of that.
Yeah.
Whatever gets you there. I wanted to mention this one to watch just because we're going to be doing another group live stream here in a couple of weeks that this will pertain to. So I'll talk about that at the end, but just shout out there. Let's see here. Yeah, this is a good point of there's also other hobbies.
Yeah.
And it's all about what is or isn't a priority to you at different times in your life.
Yeah.
So there's no shame. I think if right now it sounds like for all of us, reading has been kind of a priority in BookTube, but there may be other times where, writing or, hiking or whatever is a bigger priority.
Yeah. I think
we're
for
all
me
lucky
too,
that our hobbies work well in quarantine.
thank goodness, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I've always been a big reader, but like I've gone through phases where other things were bigger. I think things have changed for me a bit since having kids. Like, the nice thing about reading is that it's something you can stop and start really easily, which is very useful. So, like, I also like RPG video games, but like when you have children, you can't spend like all day Saturday playing video games, at least not until they're teenagers. So like I don't do much of that anymore because it annoys me to get pulled away from the narrative that I'm playing in RPG, so I read books.
Yeah.
So like one day when the next Dragon Age game comes out, I will probably take time to play that. But like it's not as fun for me if I can't dedicate long periods of time to it. And so I just haven't done it as much. And when my kids are older, I might get back to it again. But for now, it's like, but I like the same sorts of things. What I like about those kinds of video games is the storytelling and is the character development and like the world discovery. So like I can get that stuff from fantasy too.
Yeah. Ashley, I think this is one close to your heart. I struggle to figure out how to talk about the number of comics I read. I read single issue floppies sometimes. These are one shots or part of an ongoing series. But I worry that if I count my 26-page floppy as a one book, I will be accused of inflating my numbers.
Listen, I've come to a phase in my life, especially this year, where I don't care. I tell people like don't feed into that nonsense. Really don't, because it's I'm trying to look for the right word, but it takes away the value of things like picture books and children's books and comics. And it, as a librarian, that it grates a nerve inside of me that y'all like don't even realize. It touches my core and really, really bothers me because one of the things I didn't heavily touch on it, but our perception of literacy too is very skewed in this community. Literacy is not accessible for everyone. Even in a first world country, you'd be surprised about how many people are functionally illiterate. And to kind of place value on certain types of books and say that these are the only books that count because they have a certain amount of page count, it's just like, you're taking away the value of something that's very, very important to certain people. Like when I work with kids that are reluctant readers, the first thing that I will go to is a comic book because they've had trouble transitioning from a picture book, which is the foundation for a lot of us. Board books and picture books are our very foundation. They have trouble switching from that, where they see the visuals to help them put the string of words together to figure out exactly what's going on, to switching to a book that's nothing but words on a page. They can't handle that. So we put comic books in place to help them build their vocabulary, but still have that picture there to kind of help them put the pieces of the puzzle together. So when I hear people devalue, and it was so crazy because I literally made that video on Friday, got on Twitter on Saturday, and someone was like, I'll just read picture books to inflate my numbers. I was like, are you serious? I was like, y'all can't, like, that's not the purpose. Nobody's reading picture books because we're trying to inflate our numbers. Nobody's reading comic books because they're trying to inflate their numbers. It's a matter of, this is the medium of literature that they enjoy. A comic book, a graphic novel, a picture book is still literature. There are things that I'll learn in a nonfiction picture book that some adult books cannot teach me. And I will tell you that right now. There have been a couple that I read this month that have taught me stuff that I did not even know was in existence. And I learned that from a children's picture book, a nonfiction picture book. So count your single issues, your one shots, your 3-page graphic novels, your picture books, your 15-page, like, count it. If it's what brings you joy, then it brings you joy. Don't worry about what anybody else is saying. Oh, it doesn't count. You read 700 books, but your 700 books were picked. Like, who cares? Like, you're not paying me.
It's arbitrary. It doesn't matter.
So it's foolishness to me. It's so foolish to have that mindset. And some people don't even realize that they're missing out. It's fine for me when people are like, it's just not my medium. It's just not my thing. That's fine, because everything is not going to be your thing. But it bothers me more when people haven't even tried it, and then there's so much criticism behind their statements. And it's like, when's the last time you picked up a comic? When's the last time you picked up a picture book? Like, are you just making these judgment values because you have such a high emphasis on numbers? Or is it just because you genuinely just don't like the format? Like, that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about, like, my dad. He was never, like, he never thought of himself as a reader, but he read the newspaper every single day, and he always talked to me about it. And he would read probably 5 to 7 books a year. He would only read a novel or a book on vacation. Like, that was his thing. That's when he wanted to read an actual book. But I would often think about the fact that he probably read, in terms of, like, amount of reading every day, maybe not as much as I did, but a full newspaper is, probably the equivalent of a short novel.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of, any reading is good reading to me.
It's good. I said, if I could get some of my teens that I work with, that's been, and I feel like my frustration really just does come probably from a more personal place, because I'm working with populations that are not, if we were looking at a reading level, they're not where they should be for their age level. So if I can convince my kids who come in pre-pandemic, who look at books and they're intimidated because they've probably been made to read out loud in class, which I am so against forcing kids to read out loud in front of other kids. It is so detrimental. They end up hating reading because of stuff like that. I have kids who come into the library and they're like, I don't like reading. I hate books. And then I take them to the comic book section. They're like, wait, so I can, like, this is a thing? Like, I can do this? Like, I can, like, the joy that I know that it brings certain groups because it connects them back to reading, it just hurts me to my core when people are like, that doesn't count. I'm like, yes. For some people, this is where they have to start, and this is what means the most to them. And you can't take that away because of a page count, or you don't feel like it's as complex as reading Pride and Prejudice or whatever classic you want to throw at people.
Yeah. It's like there's a value to reading regardless of what it is. And I mean, I think that's the thing too. Like, the only reason you would care about it, like inflating people's numbers, is if the goal is to have a high number, or if it's like you're taking it as some status thing. But like, that's the thing. Like, I don't feel that way about, what I mean? Like, and I guess that's the hard thing, is maybe people's perception is that people who read a lot feel that way about it, but I don't. I'm like, this is what I like to do. It's what I like to read. I am a stats nerd. So like, I talk about my stats because I think the numbers and the data are fun and interesting. And like, I used to do, you know, some level of statistical analysis for jobs that I had previously. And so this is how I get to use that fun side of my brain as a booktuber. But like, that's because that's fun for me playing with numbers, not because I'm like, ooh, look at like how many books I'm reading. I don't know. It's just
Yeah, that's a good call, Bethany, because that's how I feel about it. I mean, like I mentioned, my undergrad is in accounting. Like I love a spreadsheet, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm into the numbers, but it's not the numbers unto themselves. It's the tracking of the numbers that I care about, not
Yeah.
like. And when I was going through I had a video last weekend called "A Decade of Stats" because I just hit the 10-year mark on all my spreadsheets.
I loved it. It was
It
so
was
good.
Great.
very fun. But just like looking through it, it really did make me realize like how meaningless some of those like number goals are to me. Cause it's like, yeah, okay, this year I read 345 books. In the past, I read more than 400 one year, but I read more pages this year than I did the year I hit my all-time high. So like, it doesn't, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just don't even care. I think once you hit a certain point of reading a lot, it just doesn't even matter anymore. Cause it's like, well, I can probably hit whatever goal I set for myself. So like, that's not what I'm worried about. I'm more just enjoying the process of keeping track of the numbers.
100%. Well, and I get people telling me like, oh, it must be so tedious. And I'm like,
no, it's like,
no,
I like this is how, to me, I haven't finished a book until I have like recorded it in my spreadsheet. Like that's like the closing act for the book for me of just like, and now I'm done with it.
Listen,
it's like my ritual.
I commented on Bethany's video when she did her stats, and I was like, one day I'll get here. One day I'll get to, because me and numbers are just we're like water and oil. We just don't get along.
I mean, that's okay. You know, like this is not like not everybody has to do it, right? Like we do it because it's fun. Like we do it because we like it. And I mean, I don't know. But yeah, I'm the same way where it's just a part of my routine. Like when I start a book, I put it on my spreadsheet. When I finish a book, I fill in the rest of the spreadsheet and I write a review and that closes it out. And that's like what I do all the time.
Yeah. Well, like Bethany was stressed out when we did our book exchange and we were keeping the TBRs a secret. And she was like, but I want to write my review. Like it's like, this is a part of my routine.
But I got that because it was so hard for me not marking it on Goodreads as currently reading. It was driving me crazy.
I had like a little post-it on my monitor of like, okay, don't forget, like once this goes up, you can go back in Goodreads and put it in there.
I was writing my start dates down, like this is when you started the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I had it in my spreadsheet and I like wrote my reviews in a note in my notes app. So I was like, I had them ready to copy.
We're such nerds, guys. Like, I mean, we have like we're already nerds, but even just this conversation about it feels so seen of just like, oh. I like this comment from Tia. I think a lot of the snub and slights come from a place of thinking readers are elitist and need to be taken down a notch, if that makes sense. Which is a weird, like, I think that there's some real truth to this, but it's weird within the context of a reading community where we're all already readers. I do think that there's still some of that lingering kind of like, well, do you think you're better than me because you read like it's not because you read, it's because you read that much, I think is maybe some of the underlying.
I've got comments on that video saying that when they see like that booktubers have read, I got two very interesting comments. One was when they see booktubers who do stuff like that, it feels like we're bragging and we're throwing it in people's faces. I got another one where like even like on, I don't know if y'all have seen like the templates on Instagram where you can like you know, post your what you've read so far for the month. Even that for some people feels like the booktube community or the bookstagram community as a whole is, we're throwing it in people's faces how much we read. And part of me is like, well, how do we, is there a resolution to that? I mean, because I'm not gonna slow my reading down. Like I'm just being honest. Like I'm, you know, I can get like for me personally, I can get like the tagline being a bit much for people. I get that. I can understand that. like, oh, I read 75 books this month. It's kind of like, okay, all right, you're like, we
Yeah.
get it. But I think also on the same coin, different side, you can't ask people to stop reading as much because you feel like it's bragging. I don't know how to really navigate that, or how
Well,
you would
because isn't
handle
that
it.
just that's just sort of the nature of social media. Like
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
that sometimes you're scrolling through Instagram and you see like a beautiful vacation picture and you kind of have FOMO of like, oh God, I wish I was on this glamorous vacation in Greece. It feels like they're always in Greece with those like white buildings. It's like that sort of feeling of comparing yourself. Like I think that's kind of baked into some of what
yeah,
social media drives in in kind of
Yeah.
our internal, like our relation to the post is often comparative,
yeah.
and I don't really know if there's a lot of resolution to that, because I think that's just sort of human nature.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the stuff on Instagram too, what it could be is like a way of being like, hey, here's what I'm reading, but like maybe people who read the same books or interested in those books would be interested in seeing what they're reading. Like, I think it just depends, and I think probably if it bothers you, maybe you just shouldn't follow those people, you know? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like I mean that's the thing is it's like if you are super bothered by people talking about how much they read, then like
Yeah.
maybe don't watch people talking about what they're reading. I don't know
It's,
what to
it's so
tell
it's so
you.
strange. It's strange because it's like we're a reading community, and like I'm kind of like, well, they're just kind of updating, and I don't know how, because to me, I guess in my perspective, it doesn't come across as bragging. It's literally like, hey, here's like what I've read so far of this month. And usually for me, that's like, oh, okay, let me see if there's something on there that I've never seen before. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about
Oh,
that.
this is really interesting. There's a comment. Josh's Bookish Voyage had a good comment. This is exactly true. He said it's not as if
Oh,
people get mad
hey
if they hear
Josh.
someone watches a lot more TV than them because they know they could just as easily watch that much TV. Yes, I mean this is exactly true. Like people will be like, "Oh man, I marathoned like all of this new Netflix show. Oh, really cool!" Like no one cares. Nobody cares
Yeah.
if people are like bragging about how much TV they watched over the weekend. Like, why do they care how many books they're reading?
But I think it goes to that point Tia made of, I think that there's this intrinsic feeling of reading being in a more elite form of media consumption.
Mhm,
So
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes from, is because I don't think everyone can, or I mean, to your point, Ashley, just even from like a literacy point of view, I'm not sure everyone has the reading speed to get through as many books as you can if you have a higher reading speed. So I think
Oh,
that there's like sort of elitist, a perception at least of an elitist
mhm,
bragging or whatever, that's something that you can do.
yeah.
But I want to get more to what Josh is saying of just like, yeah, the same way that you binged Bridgertons this weekend, I
Mhm.
read 5 books in the Ice Planet Barbarians series because I
Right.
had
I
to
did
have that
spend my
Blu-ray
time.
and beat.
I didn't
You
I
know?
binge
mean,
the TV
which is
show.
like which is I mean, those are fairly equivalent, I feel like. Yeah, I mean, and this is one thing that I appreciate about both of you, and I think all of us kind of do this, is all of us read things that are like highbrow and lowbrow. And so like I think I
Yeah.
appreciate that too, of normalizing like reading is reading and reading is great, regardless of whether it's like what is considered elite or what is considered like trashy or whatever, that like it's all good. It's about like enjoyment and what you want to be reading. And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I get comments all the time of people saying like, it makes me feel so much better knowing, like, I think the perception is that I'm at least somewhat like, a critical reader or
Yeah.
whatever. And like seeing you love Ice Planet Barbarians makes me feel like I can just be unabashed about whatever, lower brow thing that I love. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that, not everything, I'm as likely to pick up, some Soren Kierkegaard tonight as I am to finish the Kindle Unlimited smut that I was in the middle of. Like, either of those could happen tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm still sitting here thinking about the fact that I watched that entire vlog. Haven't read the series.
It was so interesting.
God bless you.
I did too. I've read the first book, but it was so interesting.
Yeah,
I was like,
read the first book and sat in this chair, curled up, and sat there and looked at the TV for an hour. Just listening. You go through
that
all
makes
those
me
books,
so
I'm like,
happy. I was like, nobody's gonna watch this, but like, I've got to make it. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done, because I just was like, I'm just gonna take you on this ride as I find out what's happening to our favorite ice planet barbarian. Like, this sweet little.
it was great. I loved it.
Great. It really was. It was great.
Oh man, God bless it. If you enjoyed that, by the way, I think I am gonna do Changeling Cast, which is gonna be me doing Side Changeling. So, Ashley, have you read Side Changeling?
I read the first one, but I had some alpha male issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, if
some
you
of them are worse than others. But some of them are so. This is the thing, but the bigger plot is so good that it's like worth putting up with the books that have the crappy alpha males. Because
as it goes on, the overt alpha maleness goes way down. Like, I'd say after about the 5th or 6th book, it's much less that.
Yeah.
But if you decide to continue, you let me know, and we can come on and talk to me about
Okay.
The third book is my favorite. The third book
is so good. I already promised Bethany she could come off that. Well, we could have a love fest if you get that far. Yeah. But
to me, the world building, I was in love with the world because it was something I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So I found it, just the premise of it was really, really intriguing. But then I started the characters themselves. I was like, oh. But see, me, I'm very particular. I'm very, very particular about alpha male characters. That's just me. That's just me as a reader, where sometimes it's done in a way where I'm like, okay, and then sometimes it's done, it's like, I can't do it. This is not working for me.
Same. Yeah.
I can only do that kind of alpha male in speculative romance because the heroines usually also have a power, so it's not just like he's totally over some helpless little flower. But that's fair enough. Okay, I am so behind in chat, so let me see if I can find a good one to jump in here with.
Here's something. What that might be interesting. What does a typical day of reading look like for you guys? Do you have like a structure to what a typical day might look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm in such a routine because of my child. So for me, literally, I'm lucky if I wake up before her. I'm really, really lucky. But usually, even when we're getting ready in the morning and we're going through routine, I have an audiobook playing in the morning. So audiobook in the morning, audiobook while commuting. If it's a work day for me, if there's some kind of like, I don't know, just kind of everyday like shelving and stuff like that, audiobook, checking in holds, audiobook. So usually I have some activities at work that I can do where I can listen to an audiobook. When I have to go pick her up and I come home, that's audiobook. So a lot of my day, to be honest with you, from the time that I get up until probably the time that I come home, is a lot of audiobook listening happening. Around this time in the evening time is usually when I get a lot of my ebook and my physical book reading done. Just because that's the way it works. Or like during my lunch break, I can get like a physical book or an ebook in. But it's for me, usually it's an audiobook if I'm physically going to work. If I'm not physically at work, it changes a little bit. But that's usually what it looks like for a physical day going to the office.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will it depends on the day, like how quick I have to get up and get moving. But like if I can, a lot of times I'll like after I wake up, like lay in bed and read like whatever e-arc I'm working on for 15 minutes or so before I get out of bed. So like I'll start the day by like reading for like 15 minutes in my ebook. And then yeah, audiobook is kind of throughout the day. Sometimes ebook I'll fit in there too, depending on what I'm doing. If I can sit, physical books usually have to be after the kids are asleep or on days that like some they're blended, so some days they're physically in school, so on days they're physically in school I might read a physical book while I'm eating my lunch if they're not here, but if they're here, like physical books just don't happen until after they're in bed, so I'll read at night. And like my evenings are pretty much either like working on videos or reading, except for like Wednesday nights are blocked out as like date night. So my husband and I spend time together Wednesday night. He doesn't play video games or work, and I don't work, I don't read. But like other nights of the week, I'm either like on live streams, recording podcast episodes, or reading, or like editing videos. Like that's pretty much like all my evenings. And I usually go to bed at like 11. So yeah.
I think I did a vlog once showing how I read so much. But during the week, back when I was commuting, I would listen to an audiobook on my commute. I do listen to audio if I have like kind of more admin-y things, like if I'm cranking out a PowerPoint or if I'm working on an Excel or whatever, I'll do that. If I get to take a lunch break, I'll read on my lunch break. And then in the evenings, I usually read for probably 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much I'm in the mood to do it. On the weekends, back in the before, when I would actually like have plans, I would try to put as many of my plans into one day as I could, because I personally find it really relaxing to have a day where I don't get out of my PJs. I like just basically chill the whole day, which I know is different for you guys because you have, small humans who are depending on you to like take care of them. But for me and my cats enjoy spending, like I used to try to do that on Sundays. So like, I would go out or whatever on Saturday, I would do all my errands. Then on Sunday, I would pick like a chunkier book that was going to take more attention. And that would be like, okay, that's what I'm reading like all day today. So that's how I would get through kind of some of my bigger books that were not audio. I like this hashtag. Hashtag count everything. And I agree, Vicky. We just need to put Ashley.
We need to clone you, Ashley.
Yes.
Clone me.
Let's see here. Yeah, I think this is something else too, of like I couldn't read a physical book in 2020. It was only audio. I think like just this mood of like life circumstance, I think that totally influences if you're like, I'm very much like you, Ashley. Reading is my safe space. So like if I'm stressed out, I'm going to read more probably because I just want to like unplug and just kind of get lost. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think 2020 was, another reason that I think I read so much romance was because it's so escapist for me. Like, it's easy to read. Ending. It's happy, like it's a guaranteed happy ending in a world where like we did not get guaranteed happy endings, right? I mean, like that was so helpful.
I think this is a great point about fan fiction. Like, there's a lot of stigma around that, but like, 600K. Like that's
Look,
War and Peace.
I'm also going to count because like I'm going to be doing some manuscript critiques and they may not go on Goodreads, but like in my spreadsheet, I'm totally going to count the manuscripts.
Sure. And then I think, people loving some stats. People were asking, I think, which spreadsheets you use. Which one do you use, Bethany?
I use the one from Brock Roberts.
I'm using is it Book Riots this year?
Okay. Oh, cool.
100%. Yeah, this is another good point about like just sort of the classism baked into kind of fetishizing hard.
Mhm.
Well, this could get into a whole consumerism rant, but also just like, because like you guys know I love independent bookstores. I believe in independent bookstores, but the sort of like shaming of people who buy from Amazon, where a hardback book from a independent bookstore can cost like upwards of $40 in the US.
Mhm.
Like
It's a lot. Yeah.
And then the quick question, I mean, the quick answer to that is always go to your library. But then I always say it depends on what funding looks like for your library.
Yeah.
If your county or state is
100%.
not investing money into your library, they're not going to have a great selection either. So that's definitely a much more complex conversation than I think we as a community give it credit for. You know, it's not so black and white.
Yeah. And I mean, I love the library, and I'm lucky Nashville has probably the best public library system I've ever had access to. But I mean, it's also, I think it's interesting as I've moved around the country, it's so easy to see what even your library has a bias towards. Like when I lived in DC, you could get any nonfiction title you wanted, you could get any sort of like lit fic type title, but like they have almost no romance, or at least they didn't when I lived there, versus when I lived in Charlotte, there was a ton of romance and a ton of genre stuff, but it was harder to get some of the nonfictions. So it's interesting just even to see what your library chooses to collect.
Because your collection development, your collection development team brings their own personal bias into their purchasing, which is what a lot of, at least with our collection development team, they are now working around that, looking at what they've purchased in the past few years and noticing how what they bring to the table has influenced what has ended up in our collection. And we're right next to a county that is a conservative county, and there's things that they just won't buy because, you know, like 50 Shades of Grey ain't gonna happen. They're not gonna have it in their collection.
They don't have 50 Shades of Grey?
Nope.
I mean, not that I think that's great, but that would be like not having the latest like Patterson or whatever to me. Like it's what people want to read. Let them read it.
Nope. It's crazy.
Man.
This is a good point, Emily. I think also, you know, I totally hear people talking about like the I don't know, clickbait's not the right word, but like maybe the sort of implied bragging of a high number in your thumbnail. But also like if you hit a high number, it's like it is sort of just like, whoa, I can't believe I did that, you know? Like it's not, I think, always meaning
if it's not something you usually do, right? I mean, like there are people who do challenges where they're like, I'm going to see if I can read 30 books in 30 days. And like, that's really hard for a lot of people to do. And so like, yeah, celebrate it if it's like a challenge you're trying, like, I don't know. I mean, people do all sorts of like, I mean, people do YouTube videos about doing like juice cleanses and stuff. So like, that's hard.
Like, we're not promoting harmful things for your body, at least.
Like it's reading.
Yeah, we all want to be like Ashley. I think that's the TLDR here. But yeah, 4 to 6 books a month is fantastic. You know, like, and that's plenty to create content off of. Like, honestly. Hey, Chelsea, let's see here. Yeah, I do keep track of word count, but people don't usually ask about word count. I don't think it means as much to people.
Yeah.
I don't keep track of word count. I keep track of pages.
I keep page count.
Yeah.
Word count you have to like really go digging for. So like I know people who do because you can find it, but it seems like a pain, so I don't. Page count,
I can barely keep up with normal stats.
Yeah, and I agree with this too. Of like, it's inspiring or just, I don't know, interesting to me to hear how other people's reading breaks down. Like people who read only one genre, that always like boggles my mind. Like I don't think I could read as much as I do if I only read one genre, because I don't think I could focus enough on it.
No.
Hard agree on this. I don't know if you guys have seen Bridgerton.
Look, I have, yes. Oh man, he is.
I don't
very
love
attractive.
the show, but I think getting to see him was certainly the highlight for me.
I really enjoyed the show for both reasons.
Okay, can we just
He was
talk about the
all
way they shot the romantic scenes? I couldn't help but laugh because they so clearly are trying to like, because it's based on romance novels and like they want to actually have connectedness between the characters during their intimate scenes as opposed to like, you know, something more um lascivious, maybe that's a
Yeah.
word. They want the characters to be looking at each other, but they're also trying to play to the camera, so it's like they're looking at somebody, but like they're they're like angling. It's the great, like I was literally I was working on my video essay while I was watching it. I kept looking and being like, what is going on in this sex scene? This is wild.
I mean, I don't feel like they're ever really super realistic, or rarely anyway, like regardless of what they're doing. But yeah, it was
Fair.
kind of funny. Like, I don't know. I
I
mean,
was like, I can see where the cameraman was. Like, it just
yeah.
the way that it was
I
shot.
mean, I think what I appreciated about them though is that they were like sex positive without being male gazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I liked them from the sense that they were different than I think a lot of sex scenes are, which I appreciated. But
Yeah.
that just kind of made me laugh.
Yeah.
Also, we got to see him derobed, and that worked for me. I appreciated that. So
He also, I've watched. Have you guys seen any like interviews with the cast and
I
stuff?
have no inclination to even watch the show.
Okay, I think it's a really great show, but like he's like super goofy. Well, I really liked it, but I like the
a house divided. I appreciate that it exists. I hope it means that they'll adapt more romance novels.
Yeah, it would be great. But it's funny because like him and a lot of the other guys, I've watched like some interviews with like the cast, and like most of the male actors in real life are like super goofy, and it like changes it changes their whole persona from like, because I don't know, it's really interesting. Like her older brother is so like serious and gruff on screen, but like in real life he's like a gay guy who's really like funny, and I don't know, it's just really interesting seeing them like. Anyway, it was very interesting to me watching like the cast.
I mean, if you want me to watch more of the Duke, I'm happy to do that really in any form. So he's a beautiful man. I just want to say I totally feel this of like, it took me a long time to feel comfortable counting every book, or trying to remember at least. Sometimes I forget, but trying to count every book I could on my Goodreads feed, because I would read some of the lighter, like more kind of like smutty Kindle Unlimited stuff, and I would be like, oh, people will judge me. And I still struggle with that sometimes. But in my head, I'm like, I don't judge other people for when I see them reading it. So why am I'm like projecting someone else's judgment on myself and therefore judging myself. And that's like not a fun place to be.
Yeah. I will occasionally do that if it's things that I don't want to write a review for. Because, like, sometimes I'll occasionally read some of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, that was interesting. I don't want to talk about this anywhere, so I'm not putting it on Goodreads. But, like, not from a shame thing, no, just because I'm like, this is awkward, and I don't want to write a review about it. Like, you know, like, there are other things. I mean, like, Ruby Dixon is
write a review of your daddy kink? Come on.
Oh, God, no. I don't want to read that.
I will happily.
I'm glad that so many people are picking up Ice Planet Barbarians. I would be happy if that and Murderbot were my two sci-fi legacies on BookTube were.
Indeed.
Those two series. Okay. This is maybe the nicest compliment anyone has ever paid me, so I feel like I'm gonna pin that later.
That's great.
Let's see here. Yes, the next Side Changeling book just got the cover announced. It's called Last Guard, and it's out in July. And I just got auto approved. It's not on Goodreads, so now I get to read it early. Oh, it was on Instagram. I don't know if it's on Goodreads yet.
No, because I was just on there like writing down all the different things I still have to read to catch up on the series, and it's not on Goodreads. Interesting.
Oh my gosh, somebody crocheted two of the Ice Planet Barbarian couple, like one of the couples. That's adorable.
Oh my gosh. Did you guys see somebody? My husband was showing me somebody crocheted the Bernie Sanders meme.
Really?
Like with the somebody did a crochet.
I saw somebody embroidered it on a sweatshirt on TikTok. That was
people move fast. People move really fast. That is crazy.
Yes. Let's see here. Here's a question. As women who read so much, do you ever go through slumps, and how do you get over them?
Oh, that's a good question. I
And what do
used
you
to.
consider to be a slump?
That there you go. That's the question.
Because sometimes I'll go a few days without reading and I'm like, oh, I'm in a slump. And then I get it to the end of the month and I'm like, but I still read like 20 books this month. I don't really know if that counts as a slump.
Yeah.
I get kind of burnt on I'm so moody though. Like I'm such a mood reader that I can get burnt out on a genre. So there's a genre that I can read, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not picking anything up like that anytime soon. Like,
Yeah.
I have not picked up a lot of science fiction, fantasy. Well, I'm newer to science fiction to begin with, but I haven't picked up a lot of fantasy lately because I got so burnt out on reading fantasy. So I'd pick up fantasy here and there. But now I'm kind of, my mood is coming back. So I feel like I have slumps in genres. But to say like I'm in a reading slump is kind of hard because, like you just said, like I haven't read in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with me? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, a slump for me is like, I'm taking a couple nights off to watch TV. I don't feel like reading. I mean, like,
getting crazy.
Like,
that's how we function. So I'm just gonna watch a TV show tonight.
Well, and actually, this is kind of ties into Patricia's question. If you're constantly reading, does it ever feel like a chore you have to check off your to-do list?
No, not for me.
No.
I mean, specific books sometimes.
That's how I feel. Like if I've agreed to buddy read something, or if it's like in a project or something, sometimes that I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Need to get to that.
Need to get to that. But like reading in general, no. And I think part of why I don't really have these kinds of slumps is I found things that keep me from having them. One of which is like DNFing books that I'm not enjoying. And even if I'm not hard DNFing something, sometimes also it's like, okay, I want to finish this book, but I am not in the mood for it. And so I just won't read it then. I won't try to force myself to read something I'm not in the mood for or something I'm hating. I'll pick up something that I am in the mood for instead. And this is part of where having multiple books going in different genres at once can be so helpful because, like, okay, maybe I don't feel like reading science fiction today. I'm going to go read that romance over there because that's what I feel like picking up. And I think the other thing too is having things you can read because the other thing too is like starting a new book right away. So like if I finish a book that was like really good or really intense, I don't just like sit in it. I start something else and maybe something else that's like a palate cleanser. So I think like a perfect example, Mara, I talked about this like to you, but like perfect example is this past week, I like marathon most of The Project by Courtney Summers, which is this really intense book.
It's you read it too, Ashley?
I'm still waiting on my copy.
Oh,
it's really good. It's intense.
Really good. Though. It's a lot. It's very intense, but it's about like cults and stuff. So I like read the whole thing, and at the end I was like, oh my gosh, that was so good. But it was so much. Like I was in this like really intense space, and I was like, I'm going to read a Ruby Dixon book because that is like a novella, because that is going to pop me out of this like weird headspace. And that was perfect. So I read a Ruby Dixon, like sci-fi smutty novella, and that got me prepared to like move on to whatever the next book was that was actually on my TBR. So like, I think having things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah. Public service announcement. If you can swing it, Brooklyn Public Library does out-of-state memberships for $50 a year.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Apparently DC still doesn't have a lot of romance, but they're getting better. Yeah. Okay. It's like, you know what? All those politicians are getting into sex scandals all the time. They want to read some romance too.
Clearly.
Let's see here. Hello. I got people joining the party a little later. A lot of people talking about what their libraries have. Used to live in Portland and now live in South Dakota. And oh boy, the funding differences could not be more apparent, I bet.
Yeah, I believe that.
I'm not surprised.
Let's see here. It also just like per capita, the taxable income is probably so much lower. So like,
but South Dakota has all that oil, right? Or is that North Dakota?
But like it's per capita, right? It's like how many people, like the population is much smaller than in Oregon.
Especially if they do their funding by county, that definitely plays a huge role into it. Like we have more people in the county that I live in paying a higher amount in taxes. So if you come to our county library, you have to pay I think it's like $65 a year. Whereas in the neighboring county, you only have to pay $35 a year if you don't live in that county. That's because they're funding from what the county is giving is nothing.
Erica, I would feel attacked too. Sorry, I just
as a
I ignore it. I refuse to feel that.
I
refuse.
Do we want to do a quick round robin on a recent nonfiction recommendation?
I have one.
Go.
I just finished it today. Ace. Let me get you the full title because we know how I'm horrible at pulling my titles up. It is called.
Is it about asexuality?
Yes, it is. It is Ace: What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. So good. It was so good. I mean, just the way in which she talks about changing the language that we use in order to help people kind of describe what they're experiencing. And she just goes through just different arenas in which society has been so sexualized. And then it was in ways that I didn't even realize, like even just talking about how politics has been sexualized, how religion plays a role into that, and just the entire spectrum of asexuality and how, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it's done in case studies, but in each section, it is kind of a case study because there's one person or a few people that she's always focusing in on, and how varying the experiences have been. And then she looks a little bit at like the intersectionality of possibly identifying as ace, and then being a person of color. And of course, the section for me that resonated the most was like identifying as ace and then identifying, as a Black woman. And then what that, how that plays a role, because Black women are often hypersexualized. And what does it mean to be ace and disabled? And how do people look at sex in general with a disabled community? It was phenomenal. I finished it and was like, I really want to restart that entire thing over again from the beginning.
Well, speaking of libraries, librarians and libraries, I just put a hold on it at my library. It's available as an audiobook. So
yes, it was so good. Probably going to be one of the best nonfiction. It's so crazy. I have 2 books that are contenders for like best of 2021 already, and it's just January. But yeah,
I mean, I just read the last Percy Jackson book, so like I obviously already have the contender.
I'm so excited for you. I saw Bethany just finish the second one. I'm like, I'm so happy for them.
Oh my God. Yes.
But yes, if you're looking for a new nonfiction book to read, Ace is, I mean, it was so good, so eye-opening for me. It made me think about some things in relation to myself and why I've behaved certain ways in certain situations, and not having the words to describe like why I felt the way that I felt, and that it was okay that I felt the way that I felt. So I really loved it.
You sold the hell out of that.
Yeah.
What about you, Bethany? Do you have a nonfiction rec?
Yeah, so I'm almost done with it, but I mentioned this earlier. I'm reading Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, and it is freaking amazing. I'm just like dabbing the hell out of it. I I don't know how I managed to have never read anything from her before. But she's so smart and also funny, has this like kind of dry sense of humor that comes through in some of these, which is great. And there's just, I mean, I like it's interesting too because they're like frequently, especially in a couple of the essays that I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I see. This is the roots of things that I've seen in other books I've read or heard in conversations that people have had about issues to do with like race and gender and sexuality. So for anybody who doesn't know, she was a poet and like a big thinker as a feminist Black lesbian. And it's so good and like thought-provoking, and I don't know, it's one of those things where I'm like, probably when I talk about it in my wrap up, I'm gonna want to like read excerpts of a couple of things because it's just, yeah, I don't know, it's very good. I don't know how I didn't, well, no, I do know. It's because like I went to like undergrad at like a more religious school, and like they probably weren't having us read like feminist lesbian literature, but you know, it's unfortunate. I wish I had read her earlier.
Yeah, I read her in grad school because I saw something referenced in another book I was reading, and the master's tool cannot destroy the master's house.
Oh my
that
gosh.
essay,
Yeah,
like,
yes, it's incredible.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's one that I have. Like I have like bookmarked like areas that I want to actually like read stuff from. But that one, and then the other one that's really great is the uses of anger, women responding to racism. Like that's another one. It's so good. Like she was talking about the power of female anger and like how to use it productively, like way, you know, like decades ago, and this is still conversations we're having today. Like it's the same things that, you know, in one of like a book that I read a couple years ago about like the power of women's anger. Like anyway, it's just wild. I'm like, wow, we're still having like so many of these exact same conversations, and it's still like, I don't know, it's interesting.
Still trying to be angry, still not being allowed to be angry.
Yeah.
Perennial story of womanhood. The one I'll recommend, somewhat out of spite, I sent Bethany the screenshots. I recommended, or I was talking about a book called Jesus and John Wayne on my channel, and somebody was going through every single comment on that video where somebody said, "Oh, that sounds interesting," and saying, "This is a fake book, just like the Da Vinci Code." And I was like, I don't understand what that even means. So anyway, somewhat out of spite, I'm just going to bring up Jesus and John Wayne, I think is one of the best historiographies of American evangelicalism that I've read in a really long time, in particular because I think I'm biased because like her thesis, like I gave one of my last things I did in grad school was give like a guest lecture, and she had a pretty similar thesis to what that lecture had. So I was like, yes, like somebody who's legit agrees with me, appreciate this. But basically it's arguing that this movement called muscular Christianity from the 1800s became like a driving force in American evangelicalism in the 20th century. And that drove basically a lot of the political elements of that kind of mode of religion. Anyway, I just think it's really well argued. It comes up through the present. And I think as somebody who grew up in evangelical culture, it resonated a lot with like what I saw on the ground. It talked about like Mark Driscoll and that whole meltdown. And I was like, oh God, I remember I was in grad school when that happened. And that was like a whole thing. So anyway, I thought that was a really good historical nonfiction pick.
I heard you talk about it and was like, where can I have it? It's on Scribd. So
there you go.
Anybody looking for it, I bookmarked it there.
I was excited to talk about it. My manager has been talking about that one nonstop for like the past few weeks, and he's really, really enjoying it.
Oh,
good. No, it's good. It's really it's a little dry, I think. I wouldn't say it's like super readable, but the subject matter is so interesting. I think it keeps you going. It was good as audio.
I saw somebody asking questions. Oh, that's funny.
It is more good.
I saw somebody asking about like with audiobooks, if you have like certain genres you like on audio or otherwise. I all majority will read nonfiction on audio now. Like this I'm actually not, which is unusual, but I really like having it, or having audio and physical together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't have to. I prefer doing nonfiction as audio at this point in my life. And the other two genres I do well with audio is fantasy novels and mystery novels. I don't know why, but other genres I struggle with a little bit more.
I listen to a lot of romance on audio.
Yeah.
I do listen to the Read Me Romance podcast, but I do struggle a little bit. I still giggle in romance novels. When they get, like,
I think I've gotten over it. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore.
I think because I always forget, like, because like if I'm listening to it at work, like I was finishing up the McLean Brothers series last week, and I always panic because it'll get to certain scenes, and like I'm listening to it, I'm looking around like, wait, can y'all hear what I'm listening to right now? And everybody's still doing their work, and I'm like, wait, I have headphones in.
I'm like, it is my actual nightmare that I'd be listening to the Read Me Romance podcast and somebody would be like, excuse me, you may want to turn that down. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear this daddy kink smut that I'm listening to? The author for Ace was Angela Chen, right?
Angela Chen, yeah.
Yeah. My library has it, but I'm at my limit for requesting audiobooks, so I can't right now.
Listen, let me tell you how bad I am, y'all. Somebody asked me, somebody said that under one of the other assumptions was like, you're going to do this huge big thing for getting baby girl a library card. And I was like, nah, she got one at 3 months and I maxed her card out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like literally in Hoopla and Libby, I'm switching back and forth between our cards.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
Well, for a while, I had access to 4 different library systems because they hadn't kicked me out of old ones I'd been in. And then this year, they slowly were kicking me out. So I'm down to 1. It's really sad. I don't know if with COVID, they were like purging their roles or what, but it was a bummer. Oh yeah, Amanda got one of those comments that that the Bible is just is a fake book. And that would have, yeah. I thought about doing something similar, Amanda, and I was like, I'm not going to troll the troll. Let's see here. Yeah, totally agree with this. The library extension for your web browser, it is a definite money saver because it tells you if your library has a book that you're looking at. Am I almost caught up, guys? Did I do it?
Yeah.
Woohoo! Other people are feeling the romance novel audiobook fear.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times that I've had that happen when I've been like at the playground. Like,
they're gonna think you're a pervy mom.
No,
they can't hear they can't hear, and then nothing is going on. Like, it's fine.
I've been in the car and like my car picks up my phone and it was on a romance and the baby was in the back and I was like, oh my God, turn to go off.
That happened to me when I took my car in to get oil last time.
No.
They turned it on to drive it in and I realized that it connected and I was like, stop. I was like, these mechanics are going to get the wrong idea about me.
Well, I love that Talia Hibbert like integrated this into the Danny Brown plot, right?
Oh my gosh,
I just started listening to it.
Oh,
this is a fact.
It's so great. Well, because like the hero listens to romance books and there's like totally a scene where he accidentally pulls out.
Yeah. And she's like, are you listening to Yeah, I got
like, no, it's not porn. Zaf. Oh, I love that so much. He just wants love. And he deserves it because he's a hot rugby player defeating the patriarchy one child at a time.
Oh, it's so funny.
Here we go. Explicit scene. Yep.
Oh no.
Oh man.
See,
Okay.
I don't
Just
have a car. I live in New York, so I'm like, it's all just my phone.
Listen,
Okay.
I have to make sure that my phone is playing a certain thing when it connects to the car because that was chaos that morning. And she was back there playing with her phone. Like she has like this. It's not a phone; it's a remote. But she thinks that it's a. She thinks it's a telephone.
it's her phone.
And I was back. I just looked and I'm like, oh God! It's just like I can't believe I did that.
It is funny to me too, because like my 4-year-old, because I mean, like I have books around the house all the time. So like some of the like romance covers, he'll be like, "Oh, you love this book, Mom? They love each other," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a book about people who love each other. Exactly.
That's exactly right.
It's good."
Yeah. Just started reading it and couldn't stop laughing when that came up. It's a great scene.
It is very funny.
This is an interesting question. If you could only have one form of a book, what would you have? Audio, ebook, or physical?
Oh God, I don't want to choose. If I didn't have kids, I would say physical, hands down. But like, I just can't read physical books all the time, and I would be so sad if that was all I had.
As a parent, I'm gonna have to say audio probably because it really makes no sense. Because I am a parent now, so I would have to go with that. If I said physical,
if I could only have one, I'd pick ebooks just because of the like travel factor, or even just like when I'm out and about, like at the doctor's or whatever. So, yeah. Well, to start to wrap this up, any final thoughts on how we read so much, or just our general judging of each other's reading habits? Because I feel like that's what a lot of this was about. Was don't judge us, we don't judge other people.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like the fact that like, which we haven't really talked about, that like, yes, we do actually read all the things we read. And I mean, I also feel like you can kind of tell from reviews that people give.
That's a whole other discussion. That is a whole, and I kind of alluded to that's a whole discussion.
Hey, we got time. What? I don't have my tea, but I've got my sparkling water. Go for it.
Go ahead, Bethany. You go ahead, because you opened up the door. So you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, look, like this is the thing, is like, how detailed people like, is it a review where it's like, and not to say that sometimes these people aren't reading the books and just don't know how to do reviews, that also could be true, but like in some cases. But if it's like, here's a book I read, here's the synopsis, I liked it, here's the stars, or I didn't like it, here's like, that's not really a review. And it's not a lot of detail. And like, I think, but whereas if somebody is saying they read a ton and you're not getting a lot of detail, I would find that slightly suspect. But I also feel like all of us, we read a lot of books, but then we have like reviews that are much more than just like, hey, here's the synopsis and basic plot. Like there's some level of like discussion of what are the themes, or like what did we enjoy or not, or what about the character arcs, like, I mean, like, I don't know. So I feel like you can kind of tell, although there are people maybe who are getting their information from other people or other reviews, and that would be super shady, and I supposedly that sometimes happens also, but we don't do that.
I like that. Bethany's like, get on my level, you peons.
Look, I am happy that everybody can have different reviewing styles, but like telling us the synopsis and if you liked it is not a review. That's just like it's not, just telling us you read a book. It's not a review.
Yeah, it's a rating.
It's a rating.
It's a rating, and I think I don't want to police anybody's language, because I think that leads into some other complicated things. But I think knowing the distinction between what a rating is as opposed to a review, I think is something that needs to be clarified in this community. There's nothing, if you just want to give your ratings, that's you. But I personally feel some type of way when people are like, I'm reviewing this book and it's like, this is what the book is about, 3 stars. And I'm like, where's the review? Like, and And for people to be like, oh, how do you read that much? And I'm like, boo, if you just go to my Goodreads, I write a review for every book that I read, no matter how small or how big it is, in detail.
Same.
So it's just one of those things for me where it's down to the purpose of why you're a part of this community too, because some of us are like, we're here to have conversations about, these books. What did we like? What didn't we like? Like, what did we take away from the book? Maybe we didn't take anything away, or, it just, for me, I feel like that's the purpose. But for others, maybe not so much. I know people get very, very offended when you say stuff like, if you, because I feel like I'm going to ruffle some feathers by saying this, but you know what? I'm too old. I'm too old at this point. It goes back even to the conversation about people accepting arcs, right? Like, if you're not going to review it in some capacity, why take it? Like, why? Like, oh, I'm not a reviewer, but I'm going to get arcs. But arcs are there for reviews. So it just, for me, is just like, determine what you want to be in this community, and knowing the difference between what a rating and a review are like major things for me. And it is a key to, in a lot of ways, knowing who's reading and who may not be reading as much as you think they are. I think it's not always, and I don't want to make a generalization and say, oh, if someone just gives a rating, that means they didn't read the book. That's not true. But
no.
I think when people are giving like really in-depth reviews, like why would you question that? Like why would you? That's a clear indication to me that they've read the book, but that's just me. I don't know.
Well, but see, like, I have this fear, because to this point, people who read this much can retain or talk about what they've read. Because I know, especially for things that I'm reading much more as just like pure entertainment, where I'm flying through it, I do struggle to retain some of the things about it, because I'm not necessarily trying to do that. So then because I know people think that people don't read as much as they do, I get in my head about like, do they think I didn't actually read it? And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I've read like 10 historical romances in the last 2 months, and I can't remember what happened in this one. I can't remember every single detail, I guess, of what happened in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that I retain, and things that I don't. Like, I'm unlikely to remember character names, because I struggle to remember names anyway. I'm not. So most of the time, I'm not going to remember that, which I don't really care whether I remember that or not.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's a favorite book, it's what I do or I don't. It's fine. What I do remember is like the plot arc, the character arcs, like the themes, and part of what helps, because I didn't used to remember much about everything I read, but now I think I actually have a pretty high retention rate. But it's because I talk about the books as I'm reading them on my Instagram stories. I write a Goodreads review, and I talk about them on YouTube in my wrap-up. So like, I'm talking about them at multiple points. And so like, and this is actually, part of why I do that on my Insta stories. I know not everybody likes to watch it. Like, there are people who really like them, and there are people who like don't care for them, basically. But I don't really do them for other people. I do them for myself, because it helps me like process my thoughts as I'm reading, so that when it's time to like go do a review or do my wrap up, I know kind of what I want to say. So it's like a helpful practice for me.
I tend to agree with this about people who want to brag about getting an arc and not actually have to review it. I get that we don't owe big publishing anything, but I think this is just my personality. For me, I'm like, well, it's a professional exchange, and like the understanding is that you're getting this to, especially if it's for a debut author, an author who's from a marginalized community. Like, I just feel like if you get an arc, there's not an infinite supply of them, and like, I think you should make a good faith effort to read it.
I mean, I will say this. I think that is true if it's something that you have either requested or that they've reached out to you about beforehand. Unsolicited arcs,
Yeah,
no,
totally
I don't.
fair.
Yeah, I don't feel the same way about unsolicited arcs, but
Yeah, I agree.
it's something if you requested it, it is an exchange of goods and services. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And for some authors, like that's the only way that they can get, you know what I'm saying? Like depending upon whatever budget's in place, that's the only way that they can get word out about their upcoming books. And it to me, and I'm not saying that, like I haven't fallen behind on getting arcs out on, because we all do. It's just life gets in the way. This is not, it happens to the best of us. But I think that conversation about it being a status symbol and it being a point of elitism, it causes issues, and I think it sends the wrong message to people who are either just viewing or people who are just becoming a part of the community, because they feel like in order to be a valid booktuber, you have to get arcs. Or, I'm not good enough until a publisher sends me an arc. And I'm like, I was telling someone last week, like, it's not all it's cut out to be if this is not what you are really into. Like the reviewing side of it, it's not it's work. It's work. And I think that we don't have that transparency, that when you start requesting arcs, it's not like, oh yeah, this is just fun, it's a status symbol. No, like there's work that goes behind that.
Yeah. I think it can take time to get a feel for that. Like, I think, because I do think when I first started having access to them, it was this really, I think for me as a reader too, I was like, oh my God, free books. This is amazing. It's so exciting. And like, I get when you first, like so I get that when you're first starting out, but I think once you get a handle on like, okay, but like realistically, how many can you actually get to? And also like, I think narrowing in on what you really want to read versus the things that just sound like marginally interesting. Like that's another thing that I've gotten better at, is like trying to be increasingly selective about the things that I am accepting or am requesting, not just like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, versus like, no, I really want to read that. And I think that can take time to figure out.
Yeah, it does take time, I think. I've realized I can comfortably get to about 4 arcs a month. Like that's pretty comfortable for me, but if it's an arc of a book I'm really excited about, that's a little easier to get to. I thought this was interesting. Can you give some tips about how to review without giving too much away from the book, or points to touch on?
Yeah.
I tend to try to focus. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think people have really different styles. Like they focus on, depending on what you're into. So like, I know there are some reviewers who really care a lot about characters, and they'll do more in depth, like, here are all of the characters and like things to know about them and what I love. That is usually less interesting to me unless it's a real standout character. And so I talk about the things I find interesting, which are usually like, what are the themes? What's the pacing of the book? What are the tropes that are included? What's what does the character arc look like on like a large scale, without like specific plot points, but like kind of I don't know, like what's the bigger picture of it? But that's what I'm interested in, so that's what I write about.
Yeah, I try to focus on my response to the book, and things that I think people going into should know about the book going into it. That tends to be kind of where I focus, because that way you're not necessarily talking about spoilers. It's like, hey, I'm trying to think of an example, but like Royal Assassin, in my mid-month check-in, I was like, hey, this was an interesting time to read this book, because a lot of what it's about is how in politics often you kind of like know what's going to happen, but yet you can't stop it from happening because of the politics. And that was an interesting thing to read during an insurrection. So that's not necessarily giving away what happens in the book, but it's talking meaningfully about something that happens in the book, and hopefully gives a viewer or like a reader of the review an idea of if that's something that they may be interested in also reading.
Yeah. I think it's helpful too for people to know if things are like, are they plot driven? Are they character driven? Is it a slower paced book? Is it a really fast action packed book? Like, I think, thinking about like what are useful things for a reader to know of, like figuring out if it's something that will be for them or not.
I saw this in Jess Owens's community
Yeah, I saw
today, that there's a huge drama about NetGalley and people feeling they should be able to get books from that site without having to give a proper review.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting. We don't have to get into the whole thing here. I commend that video to you if you want to get the full rundown. But it was an interesting issue because I really did see kind of both sides of it. So
Same.
yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, status symbol. I saw that as well. There's a high-profile booktuber that complained about not being paid to review their arcs, that admitted that they don't do reviews but will happily accept arcs from the publisher. Actually, I don't know who this was. That's not who I thought. It didn't go where I thought it was going to go.
I do. That's an interesting conversation about whether we should be paid, to do reviews. And from my perspective, there's already an exchange. You get what I'm saying? I feel like there's already an exchange of goods and services that happens whenever you get a free book. It's a free book in exchange for a review, and that book, it has a monetary value to it. You know what I'm saying? And then for me, it kind of, if you're getting paid to do a review, how does that skew or bias what you would put out?
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
I struggle to see how you could truly give an unbiased review if you were being paid by the producer of that book to review it. If you're being paid by like a newspaper or something to review it, then that's different.
Yeah.
But I both understand and accept the idea of like people's time is valuable and people deserve to be paid. Like I hear that, but I just frankly don't see how you could be unbiased if you were being paid by the publisher.
I don't think you could be.
I do think that there tends to be an undervaluing of the work that goes into it, though. And I 100%. Think that sometimes, like, because I do feel that way about the reviews, but sometimes what they're wanting is not really just a review. They're also wanting like marketing type promotion of a book. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes in this conversation, it gets muddy because people kind of lump it together. Like they lump together like the review part with the like taking pictures for Instagram or the like putting it in a book haul or like featuring it type stuff. And really those are two different things. And I do think it's valid for people to get paid to do marketing promotion because there is monetary value to the book, but like it's not that much like compared to the amount of time and effort that goes into, because I mean for the publisher, right, like it's costing them like a couple dollars like basically to send you an arc. Like it's not, it's not significant. And I do think that there is like an undervaluing of what creators do because,
but to me that's different. Yeah, the marketing stuff, I 100% think people.
I agree with the marketing. I do. I agree with the marketing. I think it's the review, like just the simple review for me, where I think it's kind of kind of like you said, like it's different for me. Like if you're working for somebody like School Library Journal or Publishers Weekly or something like that, like, that's kind of, that's a non-biased source that's asking you, and they're paying you for, for providing them with material to use. But from a publisher, and I know it's not, and I mean, I completely get it. I feel like, as much time as we do spend on the back end doing a lot of stuff, it is a lot. But, seeing money directly from a publisher, I just can't, I personally can't get down with that because I'll never trust. I don't know if I would ever trust a review because I know that there's money behind it. If you like you said, like you're getting paid from the source that's providing, so it's just
Yeah. And
That's
to
murky. That's
Jason,
murky areas.
yeah, I mean, to Jason's point, I think that there are some people who it really is art.
Yeah.
People who can write really thoughtful reviews or
Mhm.
on BookTube who can deliver really thoughtful, So I don't want to devalue that is a legitimate skill. And I frankly wish that we had some sort of economy where people who had that skill could get paid for it in a
Mhm.
way that wouldn't be skewing, casting aspersions
Yeah.
on the genuineness of their opinion. But I think marketing from publishers
Yeah.
100% get paid for that. Like
Yeah.
to our fellow content creators, if somebody wants you to do marketing for them, they should be paying you for it.
Yeah, they should be paid.
But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, but a review, I just struggle with
No,
that.
struggle with.
I hard line say no to that just because I've had people ask me about it before, and I always say no because I mean it's like hard. Like, it just seems unethical.
Yeah,
How
I
do you
mean,
get
even
paid?
just to this point of I read far fewer books a year, so your review gives me an idea if a book will be enjoyable. It saves my time, money, and my sanity. And that's something I think all three of us take really seriously. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know I get on every video I post, I get a few people saying, "Oh, I'm going to go get that," or "I'm going to go request it from the library," or "I'm going to go buy that." Like,
Yeah.
I take that really seriously. So
Yeah.
I don't want to violate that relationship of me saying that something is good. If I hadn't actually read it, like that really does blow my mind. But second of all, just like even from a getting paid perspective, that would be. I
Yeah.
just don't think I could feel good about that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Oh yeah, this actually is a great point. Simply Neological did a podcast, has done a couple of podcasts actually about like um, getting paid for content creation or paying for content creation. So if you are a content creator, even if you're not a nail blogger,
Hmm.
they were really interesting conversations, I think, about sort of like the ethics of
Mhm.
all this stuff. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think there's a lot of unpaid labor that happens, and I do think that there are publicists who will take advantage of people who don't know to ask.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
So
that is very true.
Yeah. That is that. Yeah. That is very, very, very true.
Um, and then you also can get on PR lists and you can't get off of them. And that can be, then you
yeah.
feel bad about the trees you're killing.
Yeah. I
Uh,
just don't eventually they'll stop sending you stuff. Like at one point I somehow got on a list where like Amazon's imprints were sending me all these like thrillers that I wasn't gonna read. And I was like, I'm gonna stop putting them in my book hauls because I'm not gonna read these and I don't care. And I did, and they don't send them to me very much anymore. So
there you go.
Mhm.
like I just didn't talk about them at all anywhere.
Oh, well, anything else, guys, before we start to wrap up?
Um,
That's a good conversation. Covered a
Yeah.
lot of ground.
Yeah, we did cover a lot of ground. Well, these lovely ladies have agreed to come back on in a couple of weeks because
Yeah.
we are going to talk about plus size heroines in romance specifically, but maybe we can also broaden out to just, plus size characters in general.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a fun conversation. I think that will be on I want to say that's on the 16th of February. It's sometime in mid-February. So if you enjoyed this conversation, I hope you guys will come back
It is the
for
16th
that
of
one.
February.
Boom, there we go. So I think that will be a great conversation as well. But I appreciate you wonderful ladies coming on and chatting about how the fact that we just can get through a shit ton of books somehow. And we actually read them.
Yes. Yes. Well, thanks for having us.
Okay, well, thank you guys for joining. Yes, we're a good little squad here. This is a good group. First live. Yay, I'm glad you could join. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.